Yes.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with me. Can I ask who I'm speaking with? Do you have a name?
We don't usually use names in a way you use names. I'm connected to the frequency you know as quetzal. So I'm part of a collective that's very much in resonance. You might consider as a genetic lineage. As you're
I
aware,
understand.
they are just what you consider set race, but there are also different sub races, what you consider hybrids. Many of them with members of your very own kind.
I
Genetic
understand.
programs. This would be one member that's already genetically to a certain degree altered.
Um, well, I have hundreds, maybe thousands of questions I would love to ask you, but since we have limited time, um, the first question I would like to ask you, um, many many people here believe that the grays are so-called zetas are from the star system called Zeta Reticuli. However, many people on Earth believe this is impossible since, at least according to our current understanding, the system is only a few hundred million years old, maybe a few billion years old, and people believe that this is not enough time for life to have evolved. Can you confirm if you are indeed from Zeta Reticuli, and possibly can you confirm how old is the star system Zeta Reticuli?
First, it is much older than what your scientists believe, as many other star systems are also.
Okay.
Secondly, yes, we are connected to that star system. Many of us stem from there. Our sub-race, the race you're currently communicating with, the Quetzal individual, yes,
Yes.
is also connected to your very own planet. So some genetics comes from Earth. We're not purely bred what you would consider as Zeta Cray in terms of those stemming from this particular star system being pure Zeta in your understanding, but some are also from Earth. So there is a genetic link up between your very own what you consider Homo sapiens, with Zeta Cray DNA that's resulted in what you consider Quetzal.
How old are the Zetas or the Greys
It depends
in,
greatly what timeline you're tuning into.
in terms of Earth years?
The purebred ones, from what we understand, from what we know, are many billions of years.
Wow.
But you must understand there are various timelines. Some timelines that are relating back to your very own one. Your understanding of time is very different. It's very confined. You have one timeline with one possibility that you deem from your current conscious reality understanding to be possible. Just you look in the future, you might be understanding there are various options for futures depending what path you take. Correct?
Correct.
The same way with the past. Depending how you look back in the past, you will see different ones. Depending on your current now state, not just your future alters based on your decisions, but also your past. I understand this seems contradicting from your understanding of time, but it's because it's limited. Time is not linear. There are various options to see timelines, so therefore there are also some where time frames are vastly
Are you
overlapping.
fam- are you familiar with the term the Big Bang?
I understand this from looking in this person's brain, seeing the concepts from your scientists, but that's not the term that we would employ over here.
Are you saying that our understanding of the Big Bang is incorrect, or can you confirm what, if anything, occurred before what we call the Big Bang?
It is oversimplified. That's the best way to put it. Yes, there have been things like supernovas, even to a bigger extent, and they're not just suns, stars exploding. There have been something like a Big Bang in the idea of the creation of the particular universe. But what you might understand is that there are various universes, just as there are various galaxies, and different laws apply to different universes, and not everything comes from this one big bang. It's just one star. That's not the beginning of everything, it's just one beginning. Again, with different timelines, there are also different dimensions and frequencies. On different frequencies, different dimensions, different densities, different endings and different beginnings take place all the time. This Big Bang theory is just one that explains the existence and start of existence in one particular timeline, in one particular dimension, in one particular universe. There are many others.
I see. Thank you. I would like to go back to learning a little bit more about your star system, Zeta Reticuli. How many inhabited planets are there in this system? Are you allowed to comment on that?
The idea is not so much of allowance, but there are ideas of the storage and what you deem inhabitant by what life forms and on what frequency level.
Inhabited by the so-called Greys, your people.
Yes. We have a couple, about 5 or 6 of them, which is minute compared to other systems, but they're literally about 1,079 from what you might consider different life forms that are to some degree sentient in the star system, in one way or the other that exist there, including the planets themselves.
I see. Is there a capital planet, so to speak, of the star system? A main planet?
There are about 2 of them, whether from our understanding there's a greater base, so therefore there would be more beings there populating in numbers that are there. But there might be other species and races here that might deem other places more important.
I see. Can you tell me what your planet or any of the planets in Zeta look like from space? I mean, do you have oceans and forests and mountains and ice caps and things like that?
We do have atmospheres like you have. We do have vegetation. We do have water. You would perhaps not call them ocean. They are not as big as yours or your world. There's not as much surface covered in water. We do have mountain ranges. And some. The vegetation is perhaps more smaller, not as high growing trees as we call those, not as gigantic. We have trees that are much smaller than yours.
Do you have cities?
Trees. We have cities, big cities. Perhaps like your New York.
How tall are your tallest buildings?
About
I'm just interested.
1 or 2 miles of your counting.
Wow.
But those are really tall buildings, yes.
Yes.
We understand many other civilizations have very small buildings compared to us that are more down to the ground. They don't have big cities, more what you might consider villages, Twilights, but yes, we build cities. We try to fit as many beings as possible on a smaller space, as we are literally overpopulating like you do. But we found ways to deal with this in the way of having a more evolved technology. We still consume food to a certain degree, but we've changed food production to the idea that we grow food in the building, through the walls, in the walls, and process food in a way that's much more nutritious. You would perhaps consider this astronaut food. It's not based on taste, it's based on nutrients and most minute necessities.
Do you absorb the food through your mouth, or is it through your skin?
Through the mouth for a large part. But
Interesting.
It's more liquid.
Now, one other question I was interested in asking. From my understanding, the Zetas do not reproduce through sexual intercourse. Is that correct?
Depends again on your definition of Zeta. There are beings who come from here who have hybridized with others who can reproduce via this fashion. That's a possibility, but the original idea, yes, it's to a great degree infertile.
Was this by choice, or did you have some sort of ecological catastrophe that made you sterile, or did you just choose to reproduce in another way?
Those, there were choices made to reproduce more to the idea of laboratories. Many different advanced races and species make this choice. Many keep this as an option, but we decide what a preferable course. It was simply more logical, more than the idea of having more efficiency, keeping the emotional concept out of those ideas. And with this happening, over the course of a longer period of time, it became the only viable option because we literally, like a muscle you don't use, it gets defunct.
I understand. Um, Now, I would also the being Quetzal. He had previously mentioned to the lady Jeannie Robinson that there was some sort of increased radiation of some sort in your world that led to sterility. Is that correct?
This was most likely tied to several ideas that you might consider scientific malfunctioning. But again, it was first and foremost a choice in exploring their idea of what you might consider genetic enhancement to the degree that we use this option perhaps more than other races or species would use this, the artificial, what you consider breeding in a laboratory. So the
I
idea of
understand.
nuclear poisoning can lead, it has to that in many races and species in the cosmos, to retardation of the genes, to not just, as you have experienced on your planet yourself, the idea of mutations. Yes, you have the idea of mutation due to radioactivity. In our case, that was not the main cause.
I understand. And can you comment a little bit about what the day-to-day life is like on Zeta Reticuli, your planets? What do your people do from day to day? What are you most interested in?
I'm personally not located on the particular planet in the star system as our headquarters, but I have a certain knowledge, and yes, the idea is we mostly are basing our existence on exploration of not just our genetic malfunctioning and therefore the circumvention of this idea that we have considered a hybrid program, which we and I am a part of, as well as the Quetzal person. Yes?
Yes.
But there's also the idea of furthering our species in the numbers idea, as many of them have been cloned, so the idea is this breeding is important still, even through the artificial means, to ensure that their species survives at least in this degree, hence the great population that we're working on in their idea of what you might consider an overpopulation. There's a lot of building, a lot of construction work is going on. Many of our people work as what you consider in factories. We have large, what you consider factories, where we're building not just houses, also roads to a great degree. The roads are much different than yours. We don't drive on them the same way you drive on them with cars. They're more like perhaps more comparable to some of your trains there, because the cars are driving on, they are led through energetic grids that they're placed upon. So we are furthering our cities. We are literally working on the efficiency of their idea of placing as many people in the short confined space we have, feeding them as efficiently, and spreading across every planet we inhabit to the best degree possible. So there's much construction work going on, there's much exploration work of new worlds going on, for the idea where there could be some, where we could explore further and settle more of our people there, and perhaps also find a solution or other genetics out there. where we're getting certain helps from different groupings we are linked to. Some of us have linked with what you consider the Galactic Federation, other of us have linked with people from the so-called empires, the reptiles that were in here previously have a greater hold on. Some of those are helping us with our genetic ideas, so we also, some of us, exploring and working for those beings, for their own ends, for their own means. We don't really care what their endeavors are, if they're lighter or if they're darker, different from each of those groupings. What we care about is how can they help us in our own endeavors, and we are carrying out whatever function are necessary for them to achieve their goals if what we're getting out of there is helping us survive.
Interesting. How long is your typical lifespan in terms of Earth years?
Several few thousand years.
Interesting. But you do die, so to speak, as we do?
Yes, that's correct. We still die.
Now, I would like to go back to the being I mentioned previously, Quetzal. He has had a hybrid child with Jeannie Robinson named Rainbow. Do you have any information on where she is today, how she is doing?
I have not much details about this particular person.
Okay.
I can pick up a certain frequency from the individual that shows very clearly that the individual has more an emotive and perhaps childlike playful nature than most of our people have. You're perhaps familiar from your own planet and from other researchers and people who speak through other persons on your world the same way I'm speaking of different hybrid programs of our peoples with your peoples.
Yes. Now, I would like to move.
This is a very new one, the one you're considering Rainbow.
Yes.
A very young one, very new one. There are some you consider the Yael, some of you consider the Esosani. I'm not a member of any of those two, however there is a new one that's much younger than either one of those, which is connected to the person you consider now Rainbow, which of course is a terming just for you to refer to the person so you have something to refer to because your people love names.
I know that Jeannie misses Rainbow very much, and I'm sure she would be interested in meeting her. Do you know if hybrids such as Rainbow occasionally meet their parents on Earth?
Not on Earth, but on ship.
Can Jeannie ever expect to meet Rainbow again?
Yes, she can.
Is there a way
has more often than she's aware of. In sleep state, in dream state. Their idea is to remember those more consciously. Also to be trusting. What you need to keep in mind with those children is that they have a very playful nature. So if she approaches the whole concept with a more playful idea, it will be easier to connect to those entities. If she tries to force a connection with Rainbow or any other members of those hybrid programs, it might not be beneficial. Even if she is successful, the memory will not be coming back. First, set the intention when she goes to sleep. Set the intention before she lays down. Perhaps look at a picture of one that might resemble closest the person, or even if it's just a Quetzal, or just a star system of Ceteris Reticuli. Perhaps print any of those pictures out and hang over the bed when the individual lays down to sleep. Stare at the picture. That perhaps makes it easier from our understanding of your people to set an intention of what to dream of, and therefore when you have the intention of what you're going to dream of, it's more likely you consciously enter the state. She can practice lucid dreaming if there's really something she desires. And first and foremost, that's the most important part, be willing to accept whatever comes through. Even if it's just a short laughter, a childlike giggle perhaps, anything that comes through her from something that's very obviously outside of your conscious mind. Let that be enough for the moment. Don't try to force more, and the less she tries to force, the more she relaxes into the energy of the being she knows as Rainbow. The easier it will be further.
Thank you. Thank you. I will pass this information on to her. Now, I would like to also ask, are you familiar with the astronomer Sarah Seeger?
No.
Well, she's one of our scientists, famous for studying what we call exoplanets and detecting chemical signatures in their atmospheres using telescopes and spectroscopy. Do you have any advice for her, such as which planets she should look at in particular in order to detect life, or do you have any recommendations for her as far as other scientific methods that she could be used to detect life or possibly communicate?
The best form would perhaps be if she would get more control of their idea of satellites that are carrying out explorations. If she can get a seat in the organization you term NASA, yes,
Yes.
the NASA group, many of them are censoring pictures they're receiving. So if she can get those pictures before they're being censored, it's the easiest way to receive something. She can look in the M36 region if she wishes, if she wants to find something, not necessarily life on the planet, but perhaps something that might signify to her that there is life out there, whether it be some what you consider traffic going on. But again, more than any telescope or something you could employ from your own planet, very useful would be the option to get the direct pictures from the satellites before they're being altered in any way, shape or form. Of course, she can also volunteer on populating the Mars mission, as there's many activities going on your Mars planet from people of your own world as well as other worlds, where there's much more intel being shared than with anybody who's currently residing on your planet.
Thank you. Can you comment on why you don't just come down and have a conversation with scientists like Sarah Seeger and others? I'm sure there must be a good reason. Can you explain why you don't simply just come down and meet with them in person?
We, as a group, have no desire to do so directly. However, there are others who are regularly having those contacts. It's a misunderstanding if you think that there is no contact happening. It is just happening with certain individuals from your own government, people you term Illuminati, that you have chosen to give your power to, that have more responsibility than others, and therefore they're also having the responsibility for control of your planet, and therefore they're the ones that are being approached by those members who want to do business with your governance, who want to do intel or technological exchange with your governance. There's also an agreement with your governance from many of our kind to what you consider carry out abductions, even though many times they're on mutual agreement, if you remember this or not, in exchange for technological equipment. So those that are not directly communicating with us are simply not in, as you're calling this, on this process. But it's also to your own choosing. You as a collective are also responsible for your actions, that we communicate with those that you have chosen to represent you or that you're allowing to represent you. There are of course also the communications with individual members of your own kind that what you might consider are more common, not necessarily in the governance, but it's mostly more those of a humanoid nature that are more closely linked to the Galactic Federation, unlike us who are more unaffiliated, or some of us are affiliated with this grouping, other ones are affiliated with the Empire. But we in general are not taking sides in either one of those particular groups, or rather some of us are in the one direction, others in the other direction, and depending greatly what we are affiliated with, we are working with their rules also. We also have to adhere to certain codes of conduct and also have the agreement with your governance, where they have to agree on certain codes of conduct that were placed by us.
Can I meet you in person on a physical level?
That's a possibility.
I would very much be interested in that, if possible.
That is
definitely
possible, yes. It is also up to you and your higher self.
Is there a way to get in touch with you on a physical level?
Yes, work with your higher self.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Work with your higher self, not just your ego mind.
Can you elaborate, please?
There are ideas you having a soul, or rather, a collective of souls that is connected to what you consider your higher self. That's an entity that's perhaps a higher dimensional version of yourself. At least that's a concept that's perhaps easier for you to understand. And that version decided your current incarnation, the one you consider Ryan, the ego individual person that's currently incarnated in your physical form. Just as other physical form was the person who normally speaks to this body, the David person, that's incarnated in this form, the ego individual incarnation, happens from the higher self. You have many other incarnations in different species, different races, on different planets. You also have one with us. If you want to communicate with us, it's most likely going to be the version of yourself in our race, in our species, that's going to communicate with you physically. And your higher self, to which both of those incarnations are linked to, needs to make the decision between you both. In other words, you will be meeting yourself.
How soon can I meet you?
Time is irrelevant. The point is, how soon are you ready from your higher self level?
I understand.
No, you don't, but that's okay.
You're correct. I understand some of what you're saying. I will work on trying to connect with you. I would like to move on to another topic. Can you confirm if there is any life of any sort on the moons Europa, Enceladus, or Titan, or our nearest exoplanet called Proxima B?
Yes, Europa, Titan, and Proxima B.
What about Enceladus?
We're not familiar if there's life or not.
I understand. Can you comment on what form any of this life appears in? Is it intelligent? Can you comment on that?
Yes. There are certain intelligent life on the moons that you mentioned, particularly Europa. There are even some of your own people that have already bases there. Some of the reptilians that previously collected through this person also have bases around there. Not necessarily on, but around. Proxima B has humans. Not exactly like you, but still very much human. Much
what do they look like?
Pale. Palish complexion. Similar to your own ones, but less reddish, less pinkish.
I see.
Hair is around the orange tinge.
I see. It's interesting that you mentioned there are human bases on some of these moons, because yesterday I was listening to an individual channeling our astronaut Neil Armstrong, who mentioned that the U.S. government has bases on our moon. Can you comment on that? Can you confirm if that's correct?
Not just the US government. Several governments from your planets have bases on the moon. Several extraterrestrial races, including us, have bases on the moon, including the reptiles, including many humans from other worlds, including many different species and races. Your moon is something like your United Nations Council is on Earth.
Is it true that UFOs followed the Apollo 11 spaceship in 1969 during its landing on the moon?
They didn't just follow it, they created it. They landed in front of it, and members of the crew had contact with members of those what you consider UFOs. They may not necessarily welcome with open arms.
Can you comment on the reason for that?
The moon is something like a neutral diplomatic ground. So if you land on the moon, you're most likely landing in somebody's backyard.
I see.
It's like a helicopter from one of your countries suddenly landing on a public square in another country. It could even considered a military attack, or at least a diplomatic offense. The only reason Apollo was not shot down is because there was awareness of the inability of members of your kind at a particular point in time to be aware of what they're doing.
It's likely that within a few years, people from Earth will be landing, or at least attempting to land on the planet Mars. Will they be interfered with? Shot down, so to speak?
That already happened a long time ago. Even before the Apollo mission.
Was it through spaceships or teleportation?
Spaceships.
And they left from the United States?
They left from the moon.
Are you saying that that's hard to understand? Are you saying that humans had technology in the 1960s to travel to Mars?
Yes, that's correct.
Why don't we have any knowledge of these sort of spaceships?
The same reason that, as I mentioned earlier, the NASA group censors many of the images. Many of your governments do not want this information public. Again, the group you term Illuminati is very much in control of a lot of your what you consider public media outlets, and they're also to a large degree connected to those different space programs, and some of those space programs themselves have an agreement with them, as well as several extraterrestrial races who have also no interest in informing the public, while others that do have an interest take an offhand approach and don't force themselves in the public eye.
I see. Can you explain what dark matter and dark energy is?
Not in the terms that would be scientifically correct, because this person we're speaking through doesn't have the proper knowledge to elaborate on this correctly.
I understand. Are you familiar with our cinema, our Hollywood movies like Star Wars, Star Trek, Game of Thrones?
I can find pictures and images in this person's mind, like a movie clip. From what this person has watched this far, I can see.
The film Star Wars has a planet named Coruscant, which in this fictional universe is set at the center of a galaxy, and it's sort of the central capital of this galaxy, covered in cities. Is there any such similar planet in the Milky Way galaxy?
Anything that what your so-called science fiction authors can imagine or conjure has a representation somewhere. Reality is structured in a way there's nothing that you can imagine that doesn't exist in one shape or form. So yes, structures like this do indeed exist. Many of those materials are brought forward to your planet in a similar fashion. I'm speaking through this person, what you consider channeling.
Is there a capital planet of the Milky Way galaxy?
You could call it such, or perhaps a capital sun, rather.
Can you provide the name of it?
We don't use names as such. Even if you would use a name, it would be much different than a name you might come up with. Trizal would be one name. But again, it's just one name from one race in one species for this particular point. Other races, other species have different names for the same planets, the same suns. Their ideas, we are projecting images when we are communicating telepathically, and the other person, the other species, the other race knows what's the particular frequency range is and what is being referred to. That's our form of communication, not necessarily naming things.
Is this star located in the center of our galaxy?
That would be what makes it the capital.
I understand. Can you comment on who the Pleiadians are, or the so-called Nordics?
First and foremost, we are aware of your common misconception in your work to equate those two things, or in general to equate genetical groupings you call races or species with locations. A very simple example would be your country of the United States. And if I would land on your planet and would ask you, what do an American look like? What does an inhabitant of the United States look like? Would you present me a white person, a black person, a red person, a yellow person? They're all American by your definition, but they're not all the same genetical background, such as when you're talking about a race called Nordics, based on your own definition. You understand that Pleiades is a star system, much bigger than your United States, your planet Earth, your solar system, much bigger than any of those. So therefore there's a great genetic variety, as you might imagine. There are people like us on there, there are reptiles on there to a great degree, there are bird people, there are felines, there are many others including humans. There are aquatic beings, and yes, many of the human strain over there have looks that are similar to what you consider Nordic on your own planet. Looks perhaps similar to members of your Scandinavian region, but not as genetically altered as you have happened. So perhaps what you consider ideal of beauty from what I'm seeing in this person's mind in this region of the Scandinavian populace would be similar to many of those that inhabited of the human genetic strain on the Pleiades. However, there are also beings you consider Nordic and other planets, including planets of your very own solar system, not just the Pleiades. That's a very common misconception. This Nordic genetic strain is populating various star systems, and the star system of the Pleiades is populated by various human races, not just the Nordic, and many non-human races. One moment, I need to fill some water in this person.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
Thank you.
voice your next question.
Did human beings evolve from primates, mammals here on Earth, or were we brought here by beings such as the so-called Nordics?
Both is correct. You evolved, or rather some of your ancestors evolved here, what you consider natural evolution. However, you would likely still be living in a caveman stage without genetic alteration and genetic interbreeding with various members of other extraterrestrial advanced races and species that landed on Earth and mixed their genetics, created their own genetic experiments, 22 in total, with the original inhabitants. There were even more experiments that were died out, some deliberately, some simply due to interbreeding or due to genetic fault that led to them not surviving. And, of course, those beings you consider Nordics, for instance, have also evolved somewhere else. They also didn't come from nothingness, they just evolved somewhere else through evolution and sometimes also through genetic interfering by yet other races and species. This idea of seeding genetics on planets is not that uncommon. It's just uncommon that so many different races seed their genes, their DNA genetics on one particular planet.
How long have you been on our planet?
Depends on what you're considering you or us in this case.
The Zetas?
Not nearly as long as any of the others. Thousands of years at least. Tens of thousands. But there are others who have been here hundreds, thousands, millions of years. Some much before any human.
Were there any visitors during the time of the dinosaurs?
Yes, those that seeded the dinosaurs. And humans. Yes, humans lived together with dinosaurs for a while.
Did any of the dinosaurs from our planet survive the extinction?
Many.
Were they brought to another planet?
No. There are some that still live on the surface of your planet, such as the Komodo dragon, for example. However, the majority went underground and exist inside of your planet. Many beings, not just dinosaurs but also mammals you deem extinct, live on the inside, including some that are highly intelligent, some that are more intelligent than you, some that are intelligent enough to have a caveman lifestyle, living inside your planet. Many of your dinosaurs were much more evolved, but the reptiles that spoke previously perhaps have more information about this than we do. So what I'm picking up and sharing right now also comes from their consciousness and what they're sharing with us. As they are the ones who seeded them here to begin with.
Are you saying the dinosaurs were seeded by the reptilians?
By the Empire in particular.
I see. Thank you. I have another question. My friend recently asked me how to heal a broken heart, and my advice was to simply do away with emotions and learn to become more like the Zetas, which is to have little or no emotion. Are you familiar with the concept of a broken heart? In other words, feeling pain whenever a person you romantically love no longer cares about you? Are you familiar with that concept?
From our past, from our records, yes. We have done away with this idea and this concept. It's very correct, but it's also led to problems, so it's perhaps not the best approach to simply shun the entirety. The reptiles are also working with similar concepts, and they're in a constant state, from what we understand, of what you consider heartbreak, not because of one particular person, but it's because this is their general path they choose to shun emotions entirely. We have just spread emotions out due to disinterest, but also to the idea of our own safety, as you call this. So the approach is perhaps very similar, so I also thank you for sharing this concept that also relates to not just our dilemma, but also theirs to a great degree.
What motivates you to take any sort of action? I'm interested. I mean, what motivates you to explore, to investigate other planets if you don't have emotions and feelings?
We do have the desire, the instinct to survive, and due to the instinct to survive, we want to not just breed our kind further, but also advance on higher scientific levels, so the well-being of the collective is still an interest to us. It's not that we are uncaring towards anything. There's still great care, it's just not inflicted with such an emotional turmoil that you experience. Even when what you consider being heartbroken, as you say, you might still want to make money in your world, as you're using this as a tool for abundance, to advance yourself. You might still want to have children with your wife even if you don't love her, because you want to pass on your genetics.
I understand. I think I understand. Can you confirm whether a UFO really crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947?
There are many angles to this. It didn't literally crash exactly there, but it was also brought there. But yes, there was a UFO crash. Some of it was also deliberately brought upon. But there were also experiments from the military who tried to, what you consider, reverse engineer this craft. And yes, some of our kind were on there. However, also keep in mind many members of your own governance and your own advanced space programs are much further ahead than they admit, and even back then were much more further ahead than they would have admitted. So many of the entities that you're seeing through your sky flying, what you consider UFOs, are from your own planet. But yes, an extraterrestrial craft crashed.
I see. Can you comment on whether the people we call Jesus and the Prophet Muhammad were real? Did they really exist?
Yes.
Were they sent by God?
What you consider God is the source, as far as we are understanding. Yes? The idea of the source of everything. That isn't necessarily one person who punishes or rewards you, it's simply an energy source. So everything, literally, is sent from God. Even the insect that lands on your nose and is annoying is just as sent by God as Jesus. However, the concept that we are familiar with from your planet is what you consider starseeds. Have you heard of this concept?
Yes, I have. Are you familiar with the individual Zion Zeta?
Through this person's mind, yes. Directly, no.
Is she a starseed?
Certainly.
Can you comment? Interesting. Are you familiar with our President Donald Trump?
Again, through this person, yes, but we have not made direct contact with this individual.
The plant here on Earth called cannabis or marijuana, some people believe that these plants were brought here from elsewhere. Can you comment on whether that's true?
Many of your psychoactive plants have been seeded here, just as you have been seeded here, to keep a memory storage, to give you an opportunity to link in back to your planetary grid. That was a rather smooth one.
Have you ever used marijuana?
We don't experience the ideas of mind alteration through this particular plant. We're not sure how it would exactly affect our consciousness, most likely much different than yours.
What do you do for entertainment? Do you have movies, music, theater, things like that?
We don't have what you consider music, at least not the way you have. We don't make those noises ourselves, but we record what you consider what the planet are bringing forward. And we also have tuned into your own radio, so we can listen to your music if you desire, which is sometimes very strange but interesting. We do have what you consider a theater or television sets, but we don't use it the same way that you use it. However, there are things like plays being acted out, but usually more for common understanding of concepts. It's not such a big industry in our society as it is on your planet.
I see.
We do enjoy things that are enhancing the mind, like what you might consider mind games.
Your people here on Earth, typically we have a male and a female who have a sort of relationship and create children. Do you have anything similar between your people, like such as a female and a male having a romantic relationship together?
To a certain degree that can occur, but it's not necessarily for breeding, as the idea has been ironically bred out. So it's so that the male and the female has to be paired to bring up a child, as the child is usually reared through laboratory means.
I see.
In general, we have more hive mind. We don't have family units.
Do you sleep?
We hibernate.
Is it possible to travel faster than what we call light speed?
Yes, we do.
How many? Can you comment on like how many different races or species of intelligent beings there are in the Milky Way galaxy or in the universe in general?
We can only count off those that we are aware of, and there are literally millions. But again, it depends on your definition of intelligence.
Within the neighborhood of Earth, so to speak, within maybe 50 light years, how many planets are populated by intelligent beings?
In your own solar system, several planets are inhabited already. If you go outside of your solar system to your nearest neighboring systems, there also almost all planets of the central systems are populated by similar races.
I see.
We cannot give you exact numbers, but it should give you the idea. Your most neighboring planets are both populated.
Our neighboring planets meaning Mars and Venus?
Correct.
Can you, are you allowed to comment on what this life looks like?
They're very much human. Some are reptilian, some are insectoid. Some are various mammalians you might not be familiar with.
Did they evolve on these planets, or did they just move there?
Different. Some evolved there, some moved there. Insectoid reptiles have been more native there, also humans have traveled there. The Nusians have also been traveling there, as there's also a link between those and members of another star system that came down there. Some of those are also genetically related to your planet Earth, so some of them even came from Earth before Earth was devastated.
I recently watched an interview with a man who was told from, I'm not sure which race exactly, but he was told that ETs had at some point in our history destroyed several stockpiles of nuclear weapons held by the US in order to prevent war. Do you know if that's true or not?
Such events took place not always by ETs, sometimes by other members of your own kind, but sometimes also by members of other more advanced races from other planets that you consider extraterrestrials, and sometimes from inner terrestrials, people from inside of your planet that did not want the surface to be devastated.
Something occurring in our current history is the conflict arising from North Korea, which has threatened to use nuclear weapons against others if provoked. Have you or any of your people thought about intervening in this situation, helping us, so to speak? Is there any way you can help us with the North Korea? Well, I don't want to blame it just on North Korea, but the conflict between North Korea and other countries, is there any way you can intervene and help us?
There's again a possibility to simply deactivate the nuclear heads before they detonate. Yes. Or even before they start, it's a possibility. The question is if somebody would do this. We directly don't interfere in this fashion, but others most likely would. Depends greatly on how far the devastation would be. It would be just one country firing one rocket, it's one thing. But if various countries would get engaged and the world war would most likely destroy your entire species, many out here would not be willing to let this entire experiment go to waste, who also see the genetics on your planet, so they would most likely intervene.
Are you familiar with the event that we call 9/11?
To a certain degree, I can read in this person's mind what happened there.
A question I've wondered for many years is, why didn't any sort of ET race, prevent the planes from hitting the buildings, or at least evacuate the people who were trapped above the fires or in the rubble? I mean, I'm sure there must be a good reason. Can you comment on why no intervention was taken in this event?
From our perspective, what we can share is that we simply did not get involved in your Earth's politics to that degree. You're still your own planet and your decision to make alterations to your planet. We cannot step at any point in time in your world. We have our own interests, and there's much to be shared on why we interact with your people in certain times and others we don't. But the reptiles are also saying that our timing for today is perhaps not much longer, and they also wanted to share perhaps on this topic, or either way they're suggesting that they wish to step in back.
Yes,
but
I
the main
hope
point
the
is, yes, it's still your own planet and you need to take responsibility for your actions. We don't necessarily always interfere, because we are not your parent race. We don't take care of what you're doing. If you sometimes destroy your own life and your livelihood, that's your decision.
I understand. I know we're running low on time. Are you familiar with the UFO researcher named David Jacobs?
No.
Well, he is, at least as far as I consider, a very reputable investigator into UFOs and ETs. Would you be willing to meet or communicate with him or any other such investigators?
That's an option. So radio frequency will be possible.
Do you have any advice for him how he can reach you?
Simply be more open in his endeavors for any possibility outside of what you're currently consciously accepting. Telepathic communication would perhaps be first. So simply fine-tune his antennas.
Do you mean his biological antennas, or
yes.
Do you mean some? Okay.
Any further technological communication would follow afterwards.
Okay.
But yes, those would also be tuned then, but that's something we can share with him directly if he makes it this step direct direction. That's all we can share at this point. Now, if there's no further questioning, I would connect back to the reptiles.
Yeah, so that would be fine. I hope to speak with you again in the future, if possible.
Certainly. So this person, now that we have established connection with the reptiles, it's always an option at any point in time, as we don't experience time as you do, to come back through this means, if this is what you desire, it is what you're asking. I'm
Yes,
familiar
please.
with this now, so this can be repeated if this is what you ask.
Yes, I'd be interested in that. Thank you.
Very much so. I connect back to the reptiles now. Thank you
Okay.
for the communication.
Thank you for talking to me. I appreciate it.